Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, there's action on the Bonusgate front. Some people have said, well, maybe I'll plead guilty to help out the prosecution. How about the size of the legislature? Should it be decreased? Nobody's talking about increasing it. And then we're going to have a big energy update, Marcellus Shale, taxes, state forest land, should we do more drilling? Guess what? Pennsylvania politics and government, in depth and in detail. And it all starts right now.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. All right, we have an action-packed show. We're going to get to it. We have two of the state's leading journalists. We're going to get into a couple of the Bonusgate. Remember that? Well, we'll get into the details of it. Brad Bumstead sitting across from me, as often is the case, Pittsburgh Tribune Review, and Laura Olson with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. All right, Brad, I'm going to start with you. Bonusgate, we forgot it. 25 people have been, under some kind of prosecution. What? How many have been settled? 12? Well, now you got 3 more, right?
Right.
Go, give me the...
Well, this is an offshoot of Bonusgate. It doesn't involve pure bonuses.
Sure,
Some are calling
right.
it Computergate.
I love that,
But this involves 10 House Republicans who were charged in November 2009 with using state resources for campaigns. Chief among them is former House Speaker John Purcell. What we saw in recent action was 3 of these 10 people have agreed to plead guilty to felonies, but only 1 and in another case 2 felonies, as opposed to the dozens that they were charged with.
So, Laura, the point is, this is called flipping. Is there how you've written, both of you have covered this story since it began. Go ahead.
We saw some of this with the earlier round with the House Democratic charges. Some of the lower level folks, these were former Purcell aides who decided to plead guilty to some of the charges. They're cooperating with prosecutors in exchange. Instead of 42 counts or 24 counts, they have 1 or 2 counts.
We're not going to convict anybody here. We don't do that on the show, but. This is typically, you've written books about this stuff, so good guy to have on this program about trials. This is typically the way prosecution works, right?
Sure. Whether it's a mafia case or it's a political corruption case, they work up and they flip one person to get them to testify against the next person, against the next, against the next. In this case, these aren't the bottom rung people. One of them is Purcell's former chief of staff. This was not good news for Mr. Purcell, who still maintains his innocence.
Right. Now, the charges, but Laura, Brad brought up a great point. We generally put these under the rubric of Bonusgate, bonuses to go out and campaign using state dollars. The real issue is the misuse of state dollars, sometimes for campaign purposes, sometimes for other purposes, where they involve nonprofits that, the money may have been manipulated for all kinds. What's the charge against Purcell?
Well, with these, it involves computer contracts for these software programs to track voters. And so it was labeled as constituent services, but in fact, the prosecutors alleged that it was used for voter outreach instead of using them as constituents. They were seen as ways to help with the campaigns, and so to track the way those voters are.
And so that leads to a whole variety of charges: conspiracy, obstruction, the usual.
Yeah.
Conflict of interest, theft.
And it's not clear exactly what defense there will be if this goes to trial, but Purcell's attorney at one point said, no harm, no foul. That was sort of the theme. And he was saying, if this stuff was purchased for government use and it was used for government use, just because it was also then used for political purposes does not make it a crime.
All right, we're going to run to break. Let me see if I got this right. 25 prosecutions in general to start. 12 were done before. 10
2 acquittals.
I was going to say 10 convictions, or people who pled out. 2 acquittals. So now we're going to the second batch of 10. Do I got that right?
Correct.
Are they all Republicans in that second batch?
Yes.
All Republicans.
Yes.
Those 10 are Republicans. The remaining 3 are another set of Democrats. Representative Bill DeWeese and former Representative Steve Stetler and a staffer.
Okay, and that's the pretty big stuff. So you've got a former leader, 2 leaders actually.
2
Steve
former
Stetler
speakers.
of the 2 former speakers. You've got Bill DeWeese, a former speaker, Democrat, and Steve Stetler also, I guess, ran the Democratic campaign
Yeah, he was
committee.
a former leader.
All right, here's the big question. Then we're going to run to break. Nothing at all in the Senate. All these prosecutions are House-related. Governor Corbett, who led this investigation, is now, then Attorney General, now Governor. Laura, what's going on? Any news at all out of the Attorney General's office about what's going on in the Senate?
Terry, you know what the answer always is.
What?
The investigation is ongoing.
Oh, it's ongoing. Well, I actually had Governor Corbett on, anyway, Attorney General Corbett, and asked him that question. He said it's ongoing. But Brad, no news has leaked out. No grand jury that, and I know you all know when grand juries are, because you usually find out. Go ahead.
Well, oftentimes we do. There's been no hint of any activity like that.
Okay. All right. Should we? Well, I'm not going to ask these folks if we should decrease the size of the legislature, but there's all kind of activity going on. We'll come back to that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by ReconnectPA.org, supporting a comprehensive transportation funding solution, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program with Laura Olson, Brad Bumstead, journalists all. All right, Laura, we're going to talk. I want to get into the subject of reducing the size of legislature. It comes up repeatedly. Nothing gets done. It takes a constitutional amendment. Now we have, of all people, who proposing a constitutional amendment?
House Speaker Sam Smith wants
The Speaker of the House. Go ahead. And what's he want to do?
Well, it's funny because they're gone for the summer. One of the few things that they came back to talk about in Harrisburg was reducing their own jobs. But he has a plan that wouldn't affect the Senate, but it would reduce the number of the House seats down to about 150, 151, I believe is the number.
153.
153, yeah.
Okay.
203, so it'd be what?
Yeah,
A
50
25% reduction, is that right? 25% reduction?
Yeah, because we have 203 members
Right,
now.
right.
It's something that rural lawmakers traditionally would not like, because if you decrease the number of districts get bigger, and out in the rural areas, the districts are going to have to cover a lot more land.
About 20,000 people in larger areas to drive. So you think like urban lawmakers that generally don't like it, Democrats, they don't want to do it, and rural Republicans don't like it for different reasons, right? I have another question for you. Am I right about that?
That's generally been true, but I think that's changing somewhat. I mean, Sam Smith comes from a rural district. Punxsutawney is,
that's true.
you know, and I
Somebody
think
else out there is more famous than him, right?
the groundhog, right? But I think that increasingly this has been viewed, especially among Republicans, as an acceptable reform that they can push. That this is something that, because it's going to be 20 years anyway till some of this would take effect. So
the thought is that they'd have to wait until the next census and then redevise the lines, if that's the right way to put it. The boundary lines, 20,000 more in the House, about, right, Laura? You did the research on this.
I believe so.
Go ahead.
And so he was saying it would take about 20 years. So in the meantime, they have to not only pass it this session, but they'd have to pass it the next session, and then it would have to go to the ballot.
Yeah.
So
I think that would be pretty popular in the polls that I've seen over the years. I think probably pretty popular with the voters. But Brad, let's get back to the seminal question here. They make $80,000 a year, pretty good health care benefits, great pensions.
And it's a 253-member legislature, the largest full-time legislature in the nation, second only to New Hampshire, which has a part-time legislature of 400 and some members. Most people think, it's a pretty good idea to reduce the size of this, but the flip side of it, and there's some really good arguments, with larger districts, it would dilute democracy in a sense, increase the cost of campaigns, and increase the need for legislative staff, which is already, by some accounts, way too big.
Okay, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to start with Laura Olson, who's been covering the whole redistricting, talking about reducing the size. We also have to make the boundary lines equitable and required under state and federal law, constitutionally as well, to reorganize districts as a result of the census. And then we'll get Scott Detrow and talk about Marcellus Shale and some other matters after we pay some bills.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association, Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. All right, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're talking about this business of reducing the size, but the legislature has to be redistricted. I think that's the exact word to put it. Laura, I know you and Brad have been working on stories about this. So population shifts in the state. We have slightly more people than we did. And when we're talking about the legislature, House and Senate seats, the question is to equalize the population. What's that translate into, do you think, in terms of what will happen to districts in the state in general terms?
Well, if you're going to equalize them, you got to look and see which ones got bigger over the last 10 years and which ones got smaller. And a lot of the ones that got smaller were the ones out west. If you look at the top 10 districts that decreased in size over the last House districts.
Smaller than the, what is it, 62,000?
Well, it's just the ones that shrunk from their previous number.
Shrunk from the previous size, okay.
Out of those 10, 7 are in Allegheny County and 2 are in Fayette County. So.
Now, Brad, you over the years, you've covered a lot of these stories as well. In 2001, correct me, I think 3 seats were moved from the west to the southeast, right? 1 from Philly because they lost population, then up to Monroe County. Do you think that's likely to happen now?
Oh, I think at least 1, possibly 2 or more, seats will move east, central east, but it doesn't endanger that many incumbents in the West.
Good point.
At least among the leaders, because as Laura's story pointed out this morning, the biggest loss in a Senate district was in that of the minority leader, Jay Costa. Is he in any trouble? No. He's on the redistricting panel.
Oh, I get it.
Most of the ones on the panel actually are from Allegheny County.
So they push out other people's districts.
I get it. So, well, yeah, they're not going to get rid of their own seats. I think that's safe to say. All right, so Laura, so basically what we're looking at is for about the 4th straight redistricting, if my memory serves, there will probably be seats moved from the west to the east, inevitably increasing over time the influence of the east in the legislature. But yet we have all these leaders from the western part of the state. Well, if
you look at where the gains were, a lot of them were either in the Lehigh County. Pat Brown's Allentown district grew by 40,000 additional people in the Senate. And South Central PA, there are a lot of York, Adams, Franklin County districts that also grew.
All right, great update. All right, we're going to bring Scott Detro on here after we go to commercial. We're going to. Scott's been covering all things energy, Marcellus Shale, and a whole bunch of other considerations. We're going to ask him about forest, drilling on PA forest lands. It's a segment you don't want to miss after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, Scott Jetro is with me. Remember, he was with Pennsylvania Public Radio. He is now with
State Impact Pennsylvania.
All right, 15 seconds. Give your sales job.
It's a project we're doing with National Public Radio, with WITF in Harrisburg and WHYY in Philadelphia. Another reporter and I are taking a look at natural gas drilling and energy issues in Pennsylvania. We're running a website, and we're doing a lot of in-depth reporting on this big issue.
And the website is?
stateimpact.npr.org.
Okay, there you go. All right, let's start with a couple of big news items. First of all, this whole business of drilling on state forest lands. Where does that stand? Are we drilling on state forest lands now?
We
Talk
are.
about that.
About 1.5 million state forest acres sit on top of the Marcellus Shale. About 700,000 of them have already been leased out. A lot of leasing under Governor Rendell's administration before he put that moratorium in place.
I was going to say, was the moratorium lifted by Corbett?
That's something that Corbett said he didn't like that moratorium. There has not been any action taken to push for more leasing of state forest land under the Corbett administration. However, that might be changing in the next few months.
Are you saying that half of the state forest lands are now open for drilling? When you said 700?
Well, leased out.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
1.5 million forest acres are on top of the shale.
Got it.
About half of that has been leased out. Now, drilling hasn't started on all of that land yet. It's just getting started, it's just building up. So right now, compared to 10 years from now, there's not that much drilling.
But they could, right at the moment, go up to about 700,000 acres, right?
They could, yeah. And that's something where a DCNR study, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, which oversees all the state forests and state parks, said that you're talking hundreds of up to 1,000 different wells, when this is at its peak on this land. They did a study last year saying that if you leased out any more land, that you could really start endangering sensitive wildlife and animals in protected parts of the state forest. But Governor Corbett's Marcellus Shale Advisory Commission, the guys who met over the winter and spring and put out a report about a month ago, they said that they endorsed more drilling if it's done very carefully and if it's done where it doesn't hurt these areas.
Let's talk about taxes from that land, which will be if we decide to tax it. I hear figures like a couple of $1 billion. Is it Texas that maybe gets $2 billion as a result of it? Any guesstimate about what revenues? I mean, it depends on what they do.
There's a lot of money there. It comes in two chunks. One is the money that the state made up front when they leased out this land. But the big cash cow is the royalties. The state would get a cut of the royalties that come from the gas produced.
Because they're on state land.
Because they're on state land.
Private property.
Right. So this isn't any sort of taxing. This is the same type of deal that any landowner would get.
Oh.
I think it varies from contract to contract, but the state's in line for, you're right, billions of dollars. And that was an issue this week when the Secretary of Community and Economic Development, Alan Walker, said in an interview with Capital Wire, he said that Pennsylvania could make billions of dollars, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said that basically solves all of our financial problems if we expand drilling and we take the royalties from there, which gets us into another
drilling,
issue.
Are we talking about going into more of the 700,000 acres or expanding it even more?
He was talking about leasing out more land, but I think one thing that gets mixed up here is that there is going to be an expansion already because of the land that's been leased out. They haven't tapped into all of that yet.
Okay. Now, one of the other things this is always an issue, and it's a big issue, is this whole business about fracking and the environmental implications and how that's all handled. Give us a quick update about where that stands.
Well, Pennsylvania put in some stricter regulations that went into effect in February, and that made well casing standards better than they were before, and that was a way to cut down on the problems of people's drinking water being infected through methane migration. Now, that doesn't have to do with fracking itself. That's an issue more toward the surface where bad well casing, the methane ends up in someone's water well, and obviously that causes problems.
Right.
One area that I took a look at on the state impact website last week was Pennsylvania is one of 5 states that now requires companies to say, this is what's in our fracking fluid. A lot of chemicals, some of them very dangerous.
The chemicals that are in the fluid that go down into those wells. Go ahead.
Right. So Pennsylvania is on the forefront of this issue in that they require, the companies to tell them what it is.
Right.
But all of the other states have some sort of public website set up. So if you wanted to look at what chemicals are being used at a well near you, or I wanted to, if you're in Arkansas, or if you're in Wyoming, or if you're in Michigan.
Why isn't that a good idea? I mean,
no, it is. I think it's something that the companies are on board with on the state level.
Oh, okay.
They're working with states to pass this law. They don't want federal regulation requiring it.
Do they need legislation to do it, or could they just do it on their own?
They do it on their own. 4 of the states have done it through regulations, Pennsylvania among them. That's just, agency level regulatory process.
Right.
Texas in June became the first state to pass a law. But here's the one interesting point on that. So any other state, you can go online and you can find this information. Pennsylvania, the companies give the information to the state looks at it, files it into a folder in a regional office, and it's never seen from again.
Why isn't that on a website?
They say
how hard would that be?
DEP says it actually is hard. They're working toward it. It's going to take a couple of years to get the database up and running, but other states have done this relatively quickly.
All right. Some Democrats, the third issue I want to talk, some Democrats have really been critical of the some don't like the expansion on state land, some want to, and some Republicans, but I think you would agree more Democrats, correct me if I'm wrong, than Republicans are into this business about the environmental and considerations, and are also really big on the tax.
Yes.
Voters in the state and polls that I've done and others say Marcellus Shale tax, that's fine. Impact fee as well as severance tax. Won't get into the complexities of this. But this past week, or last week, I should say, Representative Mike Sturla really went after this in a big way, making comments about how this whole industry was sort of leading to the fall and decline of civilization in Pennsylvania.
The way he described it was that, it sounded like he was talking about some sort of 18th century gold rush town or Western town with guys pouring into the bars and causing all kinds of problems. A lot of what he said was actually based, in fact, there have been a lot of studies about how, and this is natural, this is not, anything specific to drilling, but you're talking about towns where hundreds of thousands of people are pouring in. Yeah. They're young guys, they're working long hours, they're unattached, they're making a lot of money, they have money to burn. What happens? They're going to go out, they're going to go into bars, they're going to get into trouble. And I've done some reports on how local law enforcement, local officials, their resources are strained by this influx of people who are sometimes causing trouble.
Well, but hold on, I want to interrupt you right here. Is this why there are calls for infrastructure and assistance to local communities in some form of tax?
Yes, there's strain on the roads, there's strain on all sorts of things on the local level.
No?
Right, but it gets into police and fire. One of the first reports I did showed a major increase in 911 calls in the counties that are hosting the most drilling. Their numbers have shot through the roof, and the problem is the county government isn't getting any additional tax from these people who are in there, because, sales tax are up in a lot of these communities, but that goes to the state. So the counties are saying, look, we're all of a sudden strained to the brink. We're doing all these things for these people who aren't even from our community, and we're going to have to raise property taxes on our citizens to pay for these people. So that's why they really want to see some sort of impact fee.
We got a minute left, but when the legislature comes back, I think there'll be heavy pressure, and given the commission report that we saw a couple of weeks ago, it does look likely there'll be pretty big pressure to do at least an impact fee for the local communities. Is that your sense?
That is, the governor had resisted the idea, saying he wanted his commission to weigh in. His commission weighed in and supported the idea. We still haven't heard too much from the governor. It's been about a month now since the report came out, and he hasn't really weighed in full. We're expecting that. I was told at some point in August that would happen, but we're still waiting. It looks like he's going to endorse the idea, but it'll be interesting to see what parameters he sets, because he is very leery about any money going to the state for this. So,
but they could do it for an impact fee and maybe some into some environmental fund to take care of some of the things you just talked about. Great update. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.